This is what it is, okay? I said empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Bruce Lee is a legend, but I'm confident that if I was water, I would short my circuits.
Welcome to the 52nd episode of the Deployment Dojo. This is a live show where we introduce and discuss software installation topics using the WiX Toolset. I'm your host, Rob Mensching, and joining me once again is my very good friend and first student of the dojo, David Edson. David, how you doing, my man?
Pretty good, thank you.
All right, so we have a big show today.
Rob,
here.
I apologize for the interruption, but is
yes,
today
Steph.
the day?
No, not today, Steph. Probably next week.
Oh, bummer. I am so excited to show everyone.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited too.
Well, could I say hi to David then?
Sure. Go ahead.
David, it's so good to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you.
Cool, thanks. I've
Okay.
heard so much about you too.
All right. Steph has been wanting to meet you for a while, David. All right. So today we're breaking into harvesting. I know we've been wanting to talk about this topic. Steph, I think, how about you step out for a little bit and we will pick you up again at the end of the show. All right.
Have a great show.
All right. All right. So, harvesting. Lots of people have been asking about this topic. And it's going to be a multi-episode topic because there's a lot of different things for us to cover. And there's a lot of things for us to cover in this episode because we kind of have to set it up, talk about it. And then we're going to go through the option that I don't like very much. Tooling provided by WiX Toolset. I don't like the options that are there. We'll kind of walk through and you'll see why. And then we will have a fun discussion about all the different things that you can do to make what works. And then like Steph pointed out, she's pretty excited to show you what we have in the next episode for the future. So with that, David, I think I need to kind of get things started with an explanation of some work that I've been doing with the dev team off before this episode, all right?
Okay.
All right, so let's bring up Visual Studio. And I've already started episode 52 here. So the build, you'll see we're already on the branch right here. And I've already started some work, and I've actually committed some work. So I want to go back into the Git changes, view all commits. I want to show some changes that we made here, namely this here. See all this red and all this green?
Yes.
All right. The change here is that the goal that we want to introduce is that we have this class library that acts as kind of our ability to read all our registry keys and abstracts away a lot of our low-level API stuff, right? You remember that?
Yes.
All right. So the goal here is that we want to change that from being a .NET Framework 4.7.2, so on the .NET Framework, a 4.7.2 assembly, to something that's net standard. And net standard means it will work both with the old .NET Framework and it can work with the new .NET Core or just .NET versions. The same assembly can work in both places. Okay, so you know the .NET Framework team, .NET team started working on this new version and they just completely forked themselves from the .NET Framework. That creates this difference, and the .NET Standard allows you to build an assembly that can work in both different versions. Does that make sense roughly?
Okay, yes.
All right, you're going to take my word for it. Now, the advantage of that is that we haven't talked about the projects for this because I've purposely been using .NET 4.7.2 for all of our existing projects thus far because the outputs are simpler, and that's what we're going to be talking about with harvesting, but the projects are way more complicated. Look at all this goo in here with all this stuff. It looks a lot like, if you remember WiX 3 projects from a long time ago, has all that extra stuff in it. Well, now it's just this really small file that says, hey, I want this SDK, I want to say I'm net standard, and then we need this one package here to make it work because it reads from the registry. Okay, so much smaller package. And then we did the same thing with console app 1, where we're going to say, hey, console app 1 will continue to use that. So we can now make it a nice small SDK style project with just these 2 lines here. We are targeting not .NET 4.7.2 for the console XE. We'll come back to it. And then down here, you can see we still reference class library in this project. Let me bring up, how about we bring up a VS Code? Would that maybe show it real quick?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think then we can see, I don't know why it opened here. Let's see, bring it over here. I make it bigger. That opened on the funny window. Okay, here we go. Close? No. All right. Yeah, all right. Too many things. Let's look at class library CS Proj. Look how small that is now. .NET Standard has one reference. Console app 1 XC project. There we go. It's nice and small. And also we did the Windows Service project here. Same sort of thing. Needs class library. It's a service, so it needs the service stuff to work on .NET 4.7.2. Okay, so this is the work the dev team wants to do. They're going to try to move to more modern .NET. Because what we've been using, if we still look at the WinForms app, look at this, right? There's all this stuff in here. This is the old style, pure .NET framework targeting, the old way of doing .NET. And now we want to try to bring up console app to a new way and make our class library work on both .NET framework and .NET Core. Does this make sense?
Okay. Yep.
This is a modernization process that a lot of people are going through, taking their old .NET framework code and bringing it to the new .NET Core. A lot of people are kind of going through this experience. And so I wanted to expose us to that so we can see what happens.
Okay.
All right. So when you do this, when you introduce .NET Standard, the ability to target both .NET Framework and .NET Core creates some complications between the two, creates some work that you have to set up between the two projects, or it creates some complications. Let's just start with that. And let me show you what those actually look like when we build. All right. So let's close our Git history. Let's bring up our Solution Explorer. We'll close build test console app 1. All right. So here we are. We have our whole project. Okay. Right. And I'm going to do a build real quick. I'll do a rebuild, get everything clean. And then I want to show you the files that get built. Let's see the output here. Still building. Everything succeeded. All right. So if we look at our class library 1 and we look at the bin and net standard, so you see it's now in this net standard directory. Here's our class library, but we start seeing this deps.json thing, which is the way that .NET Core specifies its dependencies on other things. We're going to see this floating around more, okay? But this is a new file that we didn't have in the past. All right, now if we look at our Windows service, for example, we look at bin debug net 4.7.2, you can see here we have our Windows service, but look at these new files that are floating in here, okay? These are files that came along because class library now wants to target both .NET Framework and .NET Core, and these are needed to make it work on both of those platforms. They're kind of like they bring along things that might be missing on either one of the frameworks. Okay.
Okay.
So before we just had this one XE that we had to ship, and we would ship our class library. Now we have to think about all these extra files that are coming along based off of our dependencies in our class library. It's like, oh, okay, so now we have more than one file. And I want to be very clear, people have been noticing that I specifically structured our projects to start with such that they were simple, that they did not have lots of extra files around them, because I knew that we would eventually touch on harvesting, and I want to drill into all of the interesting configurations that you have in it. And now we're exposing that by trying to modernize our class library to .NET Standard. All right, so we're introducing more problems that I didn't want to introduce into the beginning when we talked about all those other topics of the world of the WiX Toolset. Okay, so here's our console app, and notice it has all these extra files here. Okay, so if we're going to ship this now, we need to carry these extra files appropriately into our install, or things do not work. All right, so we have this. I'm just going to bring up real quick because we'll see it. I expect we'll bring up the sandbox real quick, and I want to show that it does not work. I just did a build, so we updated these projects. They have more dependencies now, And then we just rebuilt our MSI, and our MSI was referring to just those exes, none of these new files or anything like that. And I expect it will not work. Here we go. Next, I accept the terms. Next, install. Here we go. And it's trying to start the services. Our service is failing to start here. It normally doesn't hang this long, right?
Right.
All right. Nope, not that one. I want the services. If we look here, we can say, oh, look, it installed our service. It's present. But notice the status is not running. All right. So I could try to start it here myself. And then the service control manager will tell us, hey, an exception occurred while trying to start the service. Okay. So our service is broken. Why is our service broken? Because we need more files, because the class library that the Windows service depends on requires that there be the class library's dependencies, those files that we just saw come along. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we have some work to do in setup. So this is why I brought it into our episode 52 changes, got the build configure all set up, and we can just get jumped in right here on episode 52 trying to add harvesting. Okay.
Okay.
Because that's what we're going to do. All right. Now that we look at the build, oh, yes. So, whoops, where'd my Explorer window go? All right. So you can see we need to get all these files. One option for us to do is to go list each of these files. Okay.
Right.
We could go into our class library and say, hey, class library now needs these files. Let's go add them. And that would look something like if we were to put it in our class library components, we would just go in here and say component, and we need, what was the name of that file? Microsoft Win32 registry. I think that's really the only one that we need in the end to come along. But all right, so we could do that. We could add them here and be explicit. And this is fine. And I want to point out that this is actually a philosophy. There's a philosophy here that says, list all of your files explicitly, manage all of your files explicitly, because setup then becomes a check that if you don't list it explicitly, it does not end up being installed as part of your application. All right. So it's just, that's a philosophy of software installation that you can choose to have, that you can say, how horrible, you know exactly what you're shipping. So, and Bob tends to come from that philosophy, by the way. So Bob will defend the philosophy generally of, here are the files that you have, list them, know them, and then if any of them are missing, you'll get a build failure. And then if you forgot to add some files, you'll have unfortunately a runtime failure potentially. Might work at install time, might not, but you will know that things don't work and you put them in here. But that second problem is why a lot of people are like, I don't want to think about all the files that I need. I just want all of the correct files. Can you please give them to me? Like, just take care of that for me. Does that make sense? It's a little more lazy, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, just give me everything that I put into my build, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right. So I haven't tried this. Let's try this real quick. So what I did was I took the class library, which I think are the new dependencies, and I added them here to say, hey, let's try to see if we can get this to run. Did I close the Dojo sandbox, right? File impacts for check. Right. And it's not able to find these files because one of the things the .NET Core system does not do is, notice that we're looking at the console apps bin directory here. If we look at the class libraries bin directory, it doesn't have them. It doesn't bring them into the directory where the class library uses them, okay? And actually, behind the scenes, the debugger and the .NET Core is using this JSON file to go and find the files that are out like in your NuGet cache and like spread around. It can find them so it doesn't have to copy them here locally until you try to build an exe. So we can't refer to these files because they're not part of the class library. We would need to refer to them when we're building the console app. Does that make sense? .NET has decided not to put all of your dependencies in this directory with your class library. They're like, no. We have this list, this big JSON file that can find them for us, but they're not here. And this is one of the complications of harvesting. Then you're like, oh, where do I actually get the files from? Okay, like where do I pick them? Here, when we look at console app, we can see them. net 472. Here they all are. All right. So if we took this out of the class library project, so this was in the class library project, which only refers to that build from that class library. And instead we go to the build test package that refers to all of our projects all over. We could go into our console app 1 and add these extra components here. And hopefully this will build. There we go. Native DLL building. I think the MSI is building because it's being slow, which means it's doing validation. All right, cool. So we said grab these, and it will grab these files from wherever the console app 1 was getting them from. All right.
Okay.
You're like, okay, great. So we're pulling the dependency of the class library in as part of a console app 1. Let's just see if this works real quick. I'm curious if this will just work. All right, bring this up. I didn't run this test before.
So it should work, right? I mean,
I think so. These are all the files that we need.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm hesitating is because there's another wrinkle I haven't even talked about that .NET projects bring to us that we're going to talk about next. All right, cool. Next, accept this. Next, install. Oh, it worked. There it goes. Okay.
All right, good.
So those were the files we're missing. And it worked for the service because if we look at where we install our files in Deployment Dojo, look, these 3 files are now here. We put them there for console app 1, but the Windows service is also using them. And we put these 3 files here for class library 1, right? As part of console app 1. So you can see how we're kind of getting twisted on why are these files listed with console app 1? Well, that's because that's where they got placed, but we could have put them in when we were defining Windows service 1, but really they're here because of class library 1.dll.
Okay.
All right. You're like, so many different choices and problems and things that by going .NET Standard, we ended up with these extra files. And by the way, .NET Standard is just the excuse to start bringing in the discussions about .NET Core, because a lot of people have been asking about .NET Core, and because it's different from the way the .NET Framework builds. It's more complicated. The build system and the way that they resolve files and everything is more complicated about the .NET than the old .NET Framework. And a lot of people doing this transition period don't realize how different it is and then get tripped up on all these little things that don't make sense unless you understand the underlying pinnings. So I'm trying to show you how some of these files are referenced and how they get put together and when you can actually see them.
Right.
Okay? That's why I'm belaboring this point right here. All right, so we could list these files, and then as we add more things to our world, we can keep adding all those files that we're like, oh, now we need these files, we can bring those along, now we need those files, we can bring those along, so on and so forth. We could keep managing those files because we will get more files as we add like more package reference to NuGet packages, right, David? Right? If we go off and say, hey, that's going to add more files. And the tricky thing about NuGet packages, they don't always show you all of the files that come with them, because you might have a NuGet package that depends on another NuGet package that depends on another one, and all those get pulled down for you. So you'd have to know and look and find all of them to list all of them, which is totally a valid way to go. But let's look at the one that honestly everybody complains about. They all want to just say, just get all of my files. All right.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to take this out and we're going to try to turn on harvesting. Harvesting is a terminology we use in WiX to say, go out and scan the file system, gather information from that, harvest that information, and then generate the necessary code needed for me to basically do what that did, but do it for me automatically. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now, to do that, it's not built into WiX. You have to add another tool, and that tool is called Heat. Now, this is what I was talking about before. I'm looking at the belt test package WiX project. I'm going to add a package reference to WiX toolset.heat. Okay.
Okay.
For those of you that are watching very closely, yes, WiX 402 is out. We need to upgrade to WiX 402. I just don't want to do that today. All right. So Heat is a tool that does the harvesting. It can hook in to your build system and it will run. Heat is a very old tool. It has some very peculiar ways about looking at the world and doing things. We're going to trip across a few of those peculiar things and the way that it works so that we can understand its intricacies, or at least its idiosyncrasies. We'll call it that. And then we'll set ourselves up for potential better ways of doing this next episode and so on. All right.
Okay.
So we're going to trip over a bunch of things here, just kind of working through it, because I expect a lot of you using heat hit these things, and a lot of it is because of the way that heat was designed back in year, I don't know, 2003 or 2 or something like that, and things it does. So heat can, we brought it in. That means that we should be able now to do harvesting. One easy way to do harvesting is to add another property to your project here called enable project harvesting. Okay, what that will do is tell this heat tool to go through all your package references and generate a WXS file for all of the files that get built from these projects. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep.
Right. All right, cool. So we'll go do that. Now I'm going to bring up VS Code. Let me do a build, and then I'm going to show you where the files get built to. Hopefully this works. All right. So as part of the WiX build, it is now running the heat tool to generate some WXS files that then are getting included into our build process, but not included into our setup because we haven't referenced them. All right. So they're there on disk, but they're not there for that. Nope. Where did I put VS Code? Did I close it? I must have closed it. All right. We'll open it again. Ugh, keeps opening on the wrong window. All right. Let's see. Let's make this bigger. Stop, please. Visual Studio extension thingy. All right. I want to see this. I'm going to make it bigger and bigger. Okay. So if we look in our built test package where we built, there's an OBJ folder, like all those intermediate files that we get built, and it did not work. I expected to see some files in here. It didn't. Where did they go? This is the right thing. Did I not save? What did I do? What did I mess up? Enable project harvesting, heat. Thought that's all I had to do. Was it not? Let's do a rebuild. Let's see if that. I was pretty sure. There we go. I don't know why the first build didn't work. Because I had a project file and yeah. No, I don't know why I didn't pick it up. Here it is. So you see these underscore files here?
Yep.
They're gray because the OBJ file folder is not part of the Git check-in. So these files are generated every build. So you don't check them in, they get generated as part of the build. All right, so if we look at like our Windows service here, we can see it generate a bunch of files for us with our directory here. Here's our Windows service 1.exe. Here's our PDB. And it goes and gets the source code from the file, because you can ask the project sub, hey, give me the source code. If you wanted to ship your source code, you could do that. And then down here, you can see we have components group that refer to the binaries, to the symbols, which are the PDB files for debugging, if you want to ship them and all that. So you can see as we did a build, this project went out and said, hey, I got all the files for the Windows Service 1. Ta-da, there it is. Do you see a problem? If we look at,
I'm trying to.
belt test, Windows Service 1, bin debug, net472. That is the files for Windows Service 1, but we don't get our dependencies.
Oh, okay.
Like it doesn't tell us, hey, did you know that you needed system service control, service process service controller, right? You do. And this is a difference in the SDK style projects and the way they report and the way that Heat operates with MS Build and tries to run all the project references. It's extremely complicated. It's extremely painful to that we've tried to keep it working in Heat from WiX 3 to WiX 4. And all of these problems and why it doesn't work here on this project harvesting is part of the reason why we're looking at alternatives to move away from Heat. All right. So all of this is about things that people, if I didn't talk about Heat, people would be really upset about. Like, but Heat is the way that everybody knows to do all this stuff. Yes, but we want to move away from it. And what I'm doing here in a lot of cases is pointing out all the problems with it that you'll have to deal with as you go along. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So Heat and the way that it interacts with MS Build to do this project of reference harvesting doesn't capture all the files correctly, which means we need to come up with a different way of doing it. Let's take a quick look at the console app 1 as well. Here's the console app 1. There's console 1 app 1.exe. But again, it doesn't say anything about all the other dependencies it needs. Okay.
Okay.
So that makes project harvesting, project reference harvesting this way not work really well in the .NET Core world. And a lot of people have been like, why? This worked in .NET Framework, and it worked given the way that .NET Framework projects build and output their outputs and list their outputs. It does not work in .NET Core because they changed a lot of the rules. So this is not the path forward. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Great. David's like, I have no attachment to any of these solutions.
Yeah. Heat. What's that? I don't know.
Yeah. I know. But it's been in the system for a long time as a way of generating code. And Heat has always had a complicated relationship in WiX because it generates code. And we've been slowly getting more comfortable with generating more and more code in the WiX toolset. But the WiX toolset, where it came from 1.0 to 2.0, even into 3.0, was a lot more of being very explicit so that you can have full control over the Windows installer, but you had to be more explicit. You had to do a lot more typing. And Heat was kind of that bridge where it's like, hey, you could run this tool and get your source code. And originally it was designed that you would run it one time and then you would check those files in, right? Which is fine, except in the world of NuGet, if you're changing your dependencies, you'd have to run it again, then check that file in, which works. And maybe we'll show that model in the future. But a lot of people just wanted to take care of everything for them automatically. So that's the route we're going down right now. All right.
Okay.
Oh, at least we're pointing down all the problems. Okay. So there we go. There's our biggest problem with project harvesting. It just doesn't work for .NET Core projects, given the way that they've changed the project system and the way that Heat interacts with the project system. The two don't go together, and they do not behave properly in this very simple example that we just saw. Okay. So what do we do instead? Well, what we can do instead is another option that Heat has is, instead of saying, hey, let me use MS Build and ask it, what are the outputs from all these? And then I can generate this in a kind of a cool format that it will show you, hey, here's, I can break down your source code. I can break down your files. How about instead, the other way to run it is, how about I get all these files into a directory, and then I'll just take all the files from that directory and bring them in. So just grab everything in a directory. That you're right. That makes a lot of sense, right? It's like, just give me a directory. All right. So we turn off enable project harvesting because it's not going to give us the answers that we want. And instead, we will harvest a project. Now, this is the next thing that's complicated about .NET SDK projects. Now, we're not going to see it completely here yet. CD, where do I want to go into belt test? Let's look at console app 1. Bin net 472. All right. So because we're building for .NET Framework, the .NET Framework still expects all these files to be in this one directory, and it will do so as part of the build. But when you start building for .NET Core, the build step does not give you all the files that you have to ship to the end user machine. They have added a new step called publish. So you have to call .NET publish on your project to do that. Okay. And I don't have it now. We're not gone to .NET. We've not adopted all the way over. So I won't be able to motivate this for you completely. I thought about bringing it into this episode. It just makes it more complicated. But the thing that .NET publish does do is it gives us a directory with everything in it that we need to ship. So it basically says, this is the directory that you have to ship for console app 1.exe. Okay.
Oh, okay.
You're like, hey, okay. That's actually kind of nice. And when you are building for .NET Core, any of them, you get a different set of files here that they bring in to make sure that everything works. Okay, great. The problem is .NET Publish is not .NET Build. These are different. You get different outputs in .NET projects, okay? And I'm belaboring this again because a lot of you that are migrating from .NET Framework to .NET Core may trip across this and not realize there's these big differences between them. So when you do a project reference here, normally we just do a build because that's normally enough to get the outputs in the right place and bring everything along. But not for .NET Core projects if you want to get the final output. So you can't just have a project reference. Fortunately, we recognize this in WiX, and we added a very, very magical thing that makes your life easier Took us a lot of work to make it work. And it only works in WiX projects. I wish it worked in other ones. But you can add a little piece of metadata on here called, say, publish equals true. Okay. This, when you say publish equals true, and I'm going to set it both on the console app, which we've updated to the new .NET Core, or to the SDK style projects, and the Windows service, update both of those, publish equals true. We will call the publish target instead of the build target. We will do the publishing instead of doing the build. Okay. This was a lot of work to make this happen. Okay. So I'm going to show you the difference. When we go to belt test, I want to show you in our directory tree, in our OBJ directory, x64 debug. There's some leftover ones. This publish folder, this was leftover. I was supposed to delete this before. I'll delete them now. Actually, it might be doing it because this do still. Oh, this do it still. Okay, that publish folder won't be there. All right. So what's going to happen is that when we say publish, we're going to get that .NET publish output I showed you here. WiX is going to automatically call it target and build it into a folder for us. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do another rebuild. Let's see if I could keep this window open. I want to kind of show both here. Uh-oh, I copied that, right? Okay. Delete all these files. Let's do a build and let's see how it goes. Rebuild everything. All right, let's watch the files that start showing up in here. See the publish? It already published those two directories for us. And if I did not have publish equals true on there, it would not, you know, I can do it. I can take the publish equals true and show that there. I'm going to set the false, I think, which is the same as removing it. Should be the same as removing it. All right, I'm going to delete all of these files again. Delete. All right, let's do a rebuild. Probably going to delete it again for me. See, no publish directory this time. Okay. All right. Which means that we only have those projects built, but not fully laid out in their various directories. All right, great. So let's put this back to true. Back to true, true, and true. And when we do a build again, just rebuild it all again, we're going to get a publish directory in here. And then we get console app 1, and we get Windows Service 1 with all of its files. Yay, they're now here. How about we just harvest this directory and bring it in?
Harvest the published directory.
Publish this publish directory for Windows Service 1, all right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm not going to type it all out because the fundamental truth is that I don't use heat harvesting because I don't like the way that it works. So I had to go look up a lot of this stuff before this episode. That's why a lot of this is much more copy and paste code than what I normally would do. We're just typing it. But I'm hoping we can walk through it and you guys will see the differences. All right. Intermediate output path is a variable inside MS Build. That is your OBJ folder. In the case, OBJ x64 debug. All right, that's your immediate output path. You can see WiX by default is creating a publish folder, and then it puts the name of the project, Windows Service 1, Windows Service 1. So I'm going to say, hey, go and get all of the files from this directory and bring them in to a component group named, I'm going to call them Windows Service Support Components. I don't know, just all the files, right? And then put them in this directory, install folder, suppress root directory, which basically says, do not give me the Windows service as a directory. I want it just the files, not the directory listed as there. And then Heat has some extra stuff where it'll try to gather all of the suppress the registry keys that are inside files. We're not talking about that here. That's an advanced feature. Just suppress it. You don't need it in all cases. And if you need it, you know you need it. All right. So that's what that extra little piece of data is. Okay. So what we're going to say is, please give me a harvest this directory, this set of files, and it would get subfolders if they were there, and give me a file when I do a build. All right. And if I did everything right, this will just work. Rebuild.
And it's just for the Windows Service one.
Just for the Windows Service. I'm doing just the Windows Service. And there's a reason I'm only doing Windows Service that we'll talk about in a second. All right, so cool. Here is the file that it generated for the Windows Service. Look, class library. Hey, there's a registry, diagnostics, there we go. And here's the Windows Service, it's xcconfig and it's PDB, right? And it took all those files, put them in install folder. Yay, we recognize that, right?
Yep.
This is Windows Service. Windows Service Components directory install folder. All right. This is our code that we wrote by hand. This is the generated code, as you can tell with all these ugly names. And then it puts all of them into this component group, and we can just grab all this stuff and ship it now, right?
Okay.
Right? Right?
Right.
We're just going to put it in here. Component group ref ID equals, give me all those Windows Service Support components. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
This isn't going to work, is it? You can tell by my voice this doesn't work. Let's do a build. We're going to build everything again. It's going to generate a file. We're going to say, hey, and we have that file. And this time it fails, and it says, hey, this class library 1 is duplicated. Hey, this class library 1 is duplicated. It's duplicated. Oh, here's the Windows Service 1 is duplicated. Oh, we have our exes duplicated. Oh, we have all these things that are duplicated in ourselves. Why are they duplicated? Oh, wait. Look, we have our file Windows Service 1 right here, and we have our file Windows Service 1 right here. Martin nailed it. The exe is in there twice, right? Not just the exe, also the class library is in there twice. So we harvested all this stuff, and now we ended up getting too much stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's great. How about we just delete this file? And we'll just let it go get the file from that directory. And then we'll delete this so we don't get the class library components from our WiX lib. We'll just get it from this directory.
Okay.
You're like, okay, great. But notice our service install. Our service install this element has to be in the same component as the file. That's a Windows installer requirement. So we have to put this file here, right? And if you remember our class library components, this component group ref into our class library components, ends up bringing all our extra registry stuff that we did to remember the data folder and set permissions and all kinds of stuff. Harvesting isn't doing any of that work for us, right? All right, so I guess we could take out the file here and know that we're going to harvest it. So we just get, these just end up being the registry keys. You see how harvesting can get complicated if you don't get things laid out nice and clean, or you need to refer to things more than just the big whole directory there. Does that make sense? You start getting all this overlap, right? Okay, so Eugene's actually already touched on it. He's like, all right, cool. How about we just not include the files that we don't want? All right. How about we say, let's not include the class library 1 because we know we're going to get it from somewhere else. And we don't need to ship the PDB. We've never been shipping the PDB. We should probably exclude that, right?
Right.
And then, and we know we're going to take care of the Windows Service 1 exe ourselves, right? So we should exclude that, okay? And we probably don't need this PDB either, all right? Which means basically don't include these things, please. Right here, and right here, right? So then we would just get these files, which this looks like the things that we were missing before, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Great. So how do we get rid of all those things? Well, when Heat was designed, it said, hey, there's this way of modifying XML on the fly called XSL, XML style transformations, language style sheet, something like that. I forgot what the XSL stands for, but it's basically an XML language that can modify an XML document as you're going along. And Heat uses that to do its work. Okay. You're like, okay, great. What does that mean? Well, let's look at one of these files. And I have pre-created this file. And when you see it, you're going to see why I did it, because I never remember how to do it all. I'm going to copy that file in, and then let's open it up. Oh, okay. So this is our XSL file, and we can then list it here as part of our harvesting. Transforms is filter.xsl. Okay, so please, when doing this harvest directory, use this filter.xsl file to filter out the things that we don't want. Okay, let's look at what that looks like. I think I just drag and drop in here. That is not drag and drop. Filter, boom. All right, what does an XSL style sheet look like? All right, whole bunch of gunk at the top. We create this thing up here that says, hey, please match, this is using XSL pattern matching. So you can say, hey, for a component that has a file source that the last 3 characters, and I don't want to get into why this is 3 and 4, is remove exes. Right? So we're going to remove all the exes real quick. And then we'll also remove all the things that are PDBs. And then we'll also filter out the file that had the source class library DLL, class library1.dll. All right, which if we look at this, so there, let's see, these are our files originally. So that would match source dir class library1. That would get rid of that one. The PDB would match at the end, so we'd get rid of that one. That would not match. That would not match. That would not match. That would not match. That would match. XEs match, so we're going to remove the XE. And then this is another PDB, so we remove it. And that gets us essentially what we want. And if we go dig into the filter XSL a little bit more, the way you apply it is you create these filters and you say, hey, copy everything. Don't drag and drop. Sorry. Copy everything except when you match these filters up here. Don't copy anything, so they end up getting filtered out. And there you go. Crash course in XSL transformations. I'm not here to explain XSL transformations. You can go read about them. This thing is, it's complicated to use. It's very powerful. It's intricate into the design of heat and the way that it filters and modifies the documents as it moves through all these mutators and things like that. But this is just one more reason why maintaining heat is one of our not favorite things, and we're looking at better ways of doing this in the future. Okay, so let's see if it works, David, right?
Okay.
You're like, what is this? This is all line noise. And yeah, it's essentially line noise. And I hope a lot of people can come and look at this episode if they're going to use heat and go, oh, I can now see how you might apply filters to that. So that filter XSL should now be passed into our harvesting process. And if everything goes correctly, I need to undo many changes. This file, when we rebuild, will get changed and we will see these pieces will be missing, right?
Okay.
This Visual Studio will automatically update for us. All right, let's see if I got it right. I'm pretty sure the word is transforms. We're also going to know if the output is successful because it's going to chop out all those things that was colliding with us, right? Windows Service 1 should. Ta-da! And look, this file just, I don't know if you saw it, it just snapped. And you can see there's our registry, our event log, our service config, and our service config. The PDBs are gone, the XEs are gone, and the class library 1.dll at the top is gone. So the filter match worked. Why did it work? Because I spent the hour before the show making sure that I got the XSL just right.
The transform.
The transform, right? Yeah. I think maybe it's XSLT. Maybe that's what it is. XSL transform. I don't remember. Like I said, this is not my favorite part of the world of WiX and heat and everything in general. So I'm not here to defend it. I'm here to show it because everybody's going to ask me, how do you use heat? They've been asking since the beginning. I want to know how to use heat to do harvesting. So this is how we're working our way through. Okay, it built. I think I'm going to do another rebuild just because. And is the dojo closed? The sandbox? I keep calling it the dojo, David. I don't call it the sandbox anymore. The dojo is not closed. The dojo is open. All right, let's go ahead and run the sandbox. We'll spin it up. And hopefully this time it will work. Installed apps, this pop up. There we go. All right, there's our bin, deep x86, debug enus. There's our belt test package. Let's start the install. Hopefully it does not hang when installing the services this time. Next. Install. Starting services. Hey, it got past that point.
It did it.
It did it. You're like, holy cow, it did it. Let's look at what we installed in our 64-bit location, where we installed to. And we can see, look, it grabbed all those extra files. These guys are all those extra files that we need because we decided to make the class library a net standard so that it could work on both .NET Framework and .NET Core, right? The complications, things that, and by the way, we have not done the work to make Console App 1 or Windows Service 1 .NET Core apps. They're still .NET Framework apps. They are using this class library on .NET Framework. We will move them to .NET Core in future episodes. More work will ensue from there. All right, cool.
Cool.
Oh. Did it work? Did it
Oh, yeah.
actually work? All right, it installed. The service started because it didn't fail. The install didn't fail. Console app 1, because this guy
Better
changed
work.
too. Woohoo! I've been sitting here for a minute while it had 60 seconds ticking down talking about the world at large. Okay.
Okay.
Woo! Fun.
It's, it's complex. So I've heard of this heat. I haven't seen it yet. And at this point, I'm almost siding with Bob a little bit. It's almost at some level of complexity. It makes more sense to just know the additional files that come in when you're changing like the framework to core rather than for me, right?
Yeah. So I totally understand it. And what you're finding is just also the general stance that we've been having from the WiX toolset all along, from the WiX toolset of being explicit, like from V1 to V2 to V3 to V4, we started, you had to be extremely specific about everything you wanted. And then we're like, okay, but we could help you do this. You could do less typing in V2. I forgot what the big thing in V2 was. V2 is just writing C# and extensions, or is that V3? Anyway, like V2. V3, we took care of another set of things. In V4, we took care of a few more things. In WiX 5, you can see the stuff that Bob's been working on. He's been focused on a lot of this, things that you don't have to type to reduce the complexity. And a lot of that comes down to us making sure that when we take on that complexity for you, it's still there. We still have to deal with the Windows installer. We still have to enumerate all these things. We still have to make sure the features hook up and everything like that. And we take on that complexity for the full breadth of the Windows installer for you in the WiX toolset, including one of the most complicated processes, which is patching. And a lot of people that are like, this is easy, I don't know why you make this so hard, are ignoring all the patching scenarios, which are not important to them, admittedly, but are important to some of the very largest users of the WiX toolset. And so we need to make sure that things work for them properly, which just adds a higher layer, a higher bar for us to get over when we start adding more of these automatic features, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm kind of justifying, well, it's not as easy as you think it is, kind of, but it's the truth, and that's why we're here. But let me be very clear. We said it in WiX before. Heat's days are numbered. It is becoming a pain to deal with, and so we will be tackling this thing. But it was not tackled in WiX 4. We just kind of brought it along in this space. I wanted to explore where we got to, and we're going to keep working. We're going to do more in this area because we need to, because it's bad when you want to work in this way. But yep.
Okay.
Ask.
Okay. Quick question though. It may not matter so much, but like more of the history of heat. The purpose was to help grab other files out there so that you didn't have to explicitly know them. Is that what it started with?
The original design of heat was point at a thing, something, and generate a bunch of WXS code for me, so I don't have to type it, but I will then take it and own that code.
Okay.
Right.
Well, so why wasn't it inside of WiX at that point? I mean,
it was
it's obviously created.
Heat is a tool. It comes along with WiX. You get it. Like, that's why it has the WiX toolset name on it. Right. It's one of our NuGet packages. You can go out and get it and those kinds of things. The thing is that nobody's probably too strong. A lot of people don't want to use heat that way. They don't want to run it occasionally and then check in the result. They want to just do it automatically every time.
Okay.
And it wasn't designed for that. And the way that it works isn't designed to do that. And you can see that because of all these challenges it's having, it just doesn't work that way. And when project harvesting was added to it, where it could like, oh, I'll go to MS Build and get your dependencies out of it. It was done in a way that was, I mean, what we knew at the time, and what we knew at the time use a particular way that is completely incompatible with the way that MS Build ended up going. And it's just kind of unsalvageable in a number of ways to turn it into this thing that people want it to be. It's kind of what's happening. It's like, yeah, you could go and put a lot of time into it, but it's not going to get you to the future. So we haven't been spending our time. We've been spending our time on lots of other things. For example, this feature here for publishing your project, right? That was huge. Like, this is nearly impossible to do that. You can do harvesting in lots of different ways. In fact, we'll talk about another different way next time.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the kind of stuff we chose to do in WiX 4. We did not choose to spend time in heat in WiX 4 because there's only so many days, times, and hours. Okay. Let's take a pause and kind of, well, let's start to check in, I think, right? I think.
Yeah, exactly. What are you checking in? Are you?
Yeah, we're going here. No, this is real. Like, this is legit. Like, if you want to use heat, this is the kind of stuff that you're looking at. And I think I want all these changes. Let me make sure. Let's look at the changes that we've made. All right. I'm not going to look at the XSL again.
Sure.
All right. What's our diff? Oh, okay. We do not need, we're not doing project harvesting. So we're not checking that in because that did not work. I think we can say that, right? Okay.
Yep.
So I'm going to delete that line. We're not going to go forward with that change. I added some white space to make it a little easier to read. We now are publishing our apps here, and then we are harvesting Windows Service 1. Oh, so one of the challenges here is that you noted that I only harvest the Windows Service 1, and that I publish both of these. Technically speaking, we don't need to publish the console app 1 right now because we only need its exe. But if you look at let's just look real quick. We need to drill into this. This is important.
Okay.
As we're trying to finish up, this is important. If you look at this publish, here's Windows Service 1, and here's all the files that we got. And then we're ignoring PDB, exe, PDB, and class library 1, right? We're ignoring those files.
Right.
So we end up getting these files in here. That's great. All right, so if we go look at console app 1, oh, look, we now have duplicates of these files. So if we were to also harvest console app 1, we would end up getting these files duplicated.
Oh, okay.
Because we'd end up harvesting them again. And then you'd be like, okay, well, we create a different filter for that, which filters them out. Well, it turns out if you filter out the PDB, you don't need this config file, and you filter out that, look, the only thing you have left is console app 1.
Okay.
All right. So technically speaking, you know what? I'm going to take the publish equals true off of here. We don't need to publish the console app 1. I'm going to say that. I better go build it again and make sure that's true.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Files are missing or we deploy things that should not be deployed. Yeah. So Valentine's bringing up the problem that you get back to of you're either missing files that you deploy or you over deploy too many files, and it's just a yin yang. You just can't get to either one of them. Another option is to harvest the files directly from the bin configuration. So Eugene, your point there is actually what we've been doing for the longest time, because these project references refer to those, they do the build, and they hook up a bind pass. So we automatically are pulling those files out of the bin location. And Martin, I'll get back to your question. That's a good question. So we're not going to publish this console app 1 anymore, which means we're going to do a normal build. So console app 1 will not be in this publish directory. All right, let's just do it. I made these changes. Let's make sure they're correct. All right, so we only have one publish on this thing, because that's the only one we technically need to. We're essentially using the publishing of the Windows service to get all of the dependencies that we need.
Okay.
And this is why I want to be clear. This is where Bob ends up getting down this. When you start getting complicated and bigger systems, if you don't design very carefully for harvesting, you can get into these things where you're over harvesting or under harvesting or overlap, and it just gets complicated. So you need to try to get really clean for that. And we will, in future episodes, tackle different ways of making it easier than what we're doing now. This episode is mostly setting up a whole series of episodes that are coming, people. We have a lot of things to talk about harvesting, which is why we did not start with harvesting. We started with a whole bunch of concepts in WiX, and now we're digging into different ways to bring in your apps. And remember that a lot of times I'm coming from a world where I know we have customers that are huge. And so your app with like 3 or 4 or 5 files may not experience these problems, but we support people that have tens of thousands of files and need to manage all of them. All right, so let's do a rebuild here. Hopefully the publish directory goes away. No, it didn't go. I'm going to delete it. For some reason, that's not getting cleaned up. All right, let the build finish. Yeah, that's not getting cleaned up. Okay, that explains why there was one left over. I have manually deleted it. Now I'm going to do a rebuild. Here we go. There's a publish folder, and now there's only Windows Service 1 in it. Okay?
Okay.
And because we did not publish this, by the way, this was magic. Nobody mentioned it, but this publish, when we set this equal to true, it automatically started pulling files out of that folder where we published to, instead of pulling them from the original bin location, where they got built to. Again, more magic underneath the WiX toolset just handles that part of stuff for you. But here we have console app 1. Its bin folder is here, xnet47, and here we have our console app 1 that we're pulling from. That publish is left over from our last example before. Okay, so we're grabbing the console app 1 from here. We're harvesting the Windows service from our directory, which brings in all our dependencies. And now we can go back to our git changes and make sure that everything looks correct. Right, so I remove that, stage that line, and I am no longer publishing the console app 1 because we don't need to. That would be over publishing it. Okay,
All right.
so we added heat. We published our Windows service, so all the dependencies of the Windows service would get laid down, and then we harvest that directory. Technically speaking, I think we could have published console app 1 instead of Windows service and got the same thing. Kind of like pick one to harvest, but not both.
Yep.
We're not looking at the XSL because it's just line noise, but you can see it if you need it. And then because we harvested it, just create a file on disk, we still need to include those those components hooked up into this component group for Windows Service Components. Ta-da! So when you get to the end of it, the changes here for harvesting are, I should get rid of those white spaces almost, add heat, add the harvest directory that says, hey, say where you want to get the files from, what the component group ID is, what install folder you want, don't get the root directory, don't do the registry stuff, it just makes everything faster and work better, and then, go figure out this magic thing, and then you're done. Include the resulting set of files in, and it's off. All right, there we go. So harvest required dependencies. That's kind of redundant. By publishing Windows Service 1. Service? Well, I don't know what happened there. Service 1. Right? That's what we did.
Yep.
By publishing English, Rob, English. Publishing Windows Service 1. Okay. I'm going to commit this. All right, let's go sparring real quick.
Okay.
People have a lot of questions. I want to make sure we get through chat because they've been asking some good things here.
Yeah, I've already asked my questions too, so I'm kind of
all right. So I saw Martin mention this kind of out of the corner of my eye as we were going along, and he asked, "Is it possible to select the target platform for publish equals true?" And yes, platforms, runtime identifiers, target frameworks, all that stuff is another thing that we added in addition to publishing. They're separate, but they interact. That you can build out your entire publish matrix from the WiX toolset. I wish every project system supported what WiX did because it makes life so much easier. In fact, Bob and I have been doing some experiments with some more really smart things. We think they're smart. By putting a WiX lib project and then creating your project references to different projects with the different architectures you need, you can have one line in WiX instead of like 3 lines with all the different, it's so much easier. And WiX just expands the whole thing out for you, builds all those projects and all the architecture you specify, and then lines you up to have all those files hooked in to your final output. It is so good. I really like it. But yes, all of that works. It is tricky, complicated, and very, very cool. So Tom Lee brought up the whole publish single file with publish single file equals true. So publish single file equals true is a way you can put in your SDK project, say, hey, give me one single exe for my file, and then just go deploy that. And that's true, except it doesn't work for .NET 4.7.2 projects. That's a .NET Core thing. And your resulting files end up really big, and you end up duplicating content between your resulting files and a whole lot of other things that we will actually talk about in future episodes as we dig into more .NET Core specific things. We've barely scratched the surface here. We have so many more problems coming for us trying to bring in more .NET Core things. Then down here, should they be installed to different folders? So Martin then brings up, I think I got Eugene's. Martin brings up the whole idea of instead of installing these files to the same directory where we had all those conflicts, David, right? When I harvested both Windows and the console app and then they collided and everything, we could put them into separate directories and then we'd harvest them. We could do that, but that kind of leads to the same place that the single exe does. Now we're duplicating the file dependencies of class library in 2 different folders, even though they're all the same files. So we're just taking up more disk space simply because of the way that they're getting published. Maybe that's what you have to do, but you do need to recognize that you are wasting disk space with the exact same files in all those different places. So it's kind of a thing. let's see. Publishes also collapses across platform subfolders from NuGet packages. Yes. So that's the important part that I was trying to call out, is that when you publish, you get all of your dependencies brought down, which is what we needed, right? That whole Windows service and like that Win registry thing. And then we got like 3 more files, right, David? I didn't even look at them. I didn't talk. I was just like, well, we need these. Why? I don't know. They came along because the registry thing needed them. I think, because I only said I needed registry keys, and I got these 2 other files I didn't ask for. That's a problem, that you just get the NuGet packages, refer to other things. Problem. NuGet went down the same path. They had to decide, do you list each of your individual NuGet packages, or do you refer to the one and its dependencies just automatically get resolved for you? By the way, when they started .NET, they started where you had to enumerate every single package. And it got unwieldy. So they went to the model where like, just refer to whatever package you want and we'll automatically figure out everything underneath it. And then a whole world of hurt collapsed on them. It is a very hard problem to do all of those things. Much easier to explicitly list them out. Oh, wait, that's the same problem we have with including files in setup. It's the same problem over and over. Well, it's not the same. There's a little different from ours, but there's a lot of similarities between automatically grabbing all this stuff and organizing it in the way that you expect it to. And as a human, you're naturally just going to grab it, go, I know how to sort all this stuff. But for computers, of course, you have to explain it all out. And it just makes these automatic harvesting things much harder, which is why one of the things we will talk about in a future episode is organizing your build to make it easier. If you're going to harvest, to make it easier to harvest. Honestly, you should organize your build anyway. So we're going to dig into all that. Is it possible to publish a self-contained app with publish equals true? Yes, that all works. And then if they go to the same folder, you have to make sure that they depend on the same version of files. That's exactly correct. If you're, if our service depends on one thing and your XE depends on another thing, and they both end up depending on the same DLL but of different versions, then you can get into collisions that way. That's absolutely true. You have to make sure that works, which is why we have the class library. It depends on one thing. It depends on its dependencies, and the projects above it depend on that. And we know that all the versions are the same everywhere. That's why we created class library. Can you specify published profile? No, published profiles are very goofy Visual Studio kind of thing, and we don't do any of that. That's why we create the publish equals true. The published profiles create lots of really complicated build problems, and it's just not a scenario when you're working inside trying to build your own installation package. The publish equals true and all that is much easier to deal with than the whole publish profile thing inside Visual Studio. Kind of goes back to the whole friends don't like friends push publish inside Visual Studio. I don't know, that was a meme from a long time ago, but it comes from that same place. The publish experience inside Visual Studio is very, it's in the wrong place of the developer experience, in my opinion. And so we did the work to remove it from the experience so that you could have a single flow through all this and have it just work. That's a very deep explanation of a random thing about publish profiles that I don't know anybody expected to get today, because I just kind of threw publish in there, didn't I? I mean, it is the coolest thing. It makes a lot of work, and it's going to do a lot of heavy lifting for us in future episodes. All right, David. We covered a lot of ground. Anything else to do?
I can't think of anything yet.
I think it's about time to push it and kick it up there. Let's see. What is the name of today's episode? Yes. I called this Harvesting the Hard Way with Heat, which is definitely the truth. Create a pull request. All right. So this is episode 52. David, we made it to our year of episodes. I didn't even talk about it at the beginning.
We did.
I kept getting Steph kind of jumped in and started taking the show away. All right. Harvesting Heat the Hard Way. And all those kinds of things. I think that's the end of the world. I'm like looking around. I think that's all I need. These are a set of changes. Some white space changes, our harvest directory, our support components, our filter thingy, and then from the previous commit where we started, cleaning up our projects, deleting some files we don't need anymore. This is a whole lot of red, which is always nice, but that was basically converting ourselves to SDK style projects, which led us down this whole path of madness. And there was the thing I did not start the episode with, but we are on episode 52. You now have a year's worth of episodes to watch if you're to watch one each week as we've been recording them, knowing that we have skipped some things. All right. Cool. David, is there anything else
Not yet.
All right, so I think that's where we're done. I'm gonna hit the create pull request. Steph, you can hear. I think we're done. We'll be back next week. Steph, we're gonna talk about the cool stuff. We're gonna talk about the cool stuff next week. I promise. David, I'm gonna show you all the cool stuff. I'm very excited about the cool stuff coming. We're gonna delete a lot of code is actually my thinking. I hope you guys are excited as I am for it. So on that note, David, you and I will be back next week. Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. In the meantime, we'll keep coding. And Steph, hey, why don't you go ahead and take us out of here? All right. Here we go. Later, everybody. Bye.
See ya.
I would love to. If you found this episode of the Deployment Dojo interesting, helpful, or simply entertaining, give it a thumbs up. And please do subscribe if you'd like to see more episodes in the future.